This is Sophie Heller, and this is an ACT reading question. The question is asking us, based on the passage, what could the reader infer will happen when you dissolve sugar in hot tea? So we saw that when we're dissolving things, we have the thing being dissolved absorbing the heat of the water or the tea. So when we see that when bodies pass from a rarer to a denser state, the heat is evolved and becomes sensible. And we saw this example with salt and water, where if you put salt in water, the salt will absorb the heat, so the water will become colder. So there's no reason to think that this won't happen with sugar. So let's look at our choices. Choice 1, we have lower the temperature of the hot tea. So this is pretty much that principle that's reflected in paragraph 1, the idea of when you add a solid, it's going to absorb the heat and make the water, or I guess tea, this is the mixture, colder. So this is probably good, but let's look at our choices. Choice 2, cause the temperature of the tea to become even warmer, just as beating a piece of lead with a hammer will raise its temperature. And that's something we saw in paragraph 2. But we don't know if the sugar is akin to the lead in the hammer. That's a solid and a solid, so that's a very different experiment. Choice 3, lower the temperature of hot tea, so if that were placed about cream in a tin container, the cream would freeze within 2 to 3 hours. And we saw this mention of cream at the end of the passage. But we don't know if this idea of cream and it being freezing is going to apply to putting sugar in tea that's already hot. So that's probably irrelevant. And choice 4, reduce the temperature of the hot tea to such a low temperature as to be painful to the hand. And we saw that actually, but with salt. We saw that if the salt was fine, it will render the water so cold, even in the summer, as to be painful to the hand. So that happens with salt, but we don't know if that's going to happen also with the chemical composition of sugar. So the only one that's somewhat reasonable is this idea that the sugar is going to absorb the heat and leave the tea a little bit colder.